everybody. Welcome again to Munro Live Podcast. And I'm here with John Bornstein. And John is the COO of Amprius. Now, you probably remember that we had already talked to Amprius, and I was very impressed with their batteries, especially for aircraft. But they've come out with something even better. And John, I'm all ears. I read this thing. I'm pretty amazed. I'm here to find out what it is and how you did, because you still have the same silicon anode platform, correct?
Yes. So what we've done here is we've continued to improve the performance envelope, if you will, of our cell, of our technology. And what we have demonstrated and what we've published is that our cell now can sustain 10C, and that is a very high, and that's continuous. That's a very high discharge rate.
Quickly, well, I'd rather you, why don't you describe a little bit about what's the difference between 10C and what everybody else has, which is like 3. So.
Well, let me explore that a little bit. So fundamentally, what we're demonstrating here is a very high discharge rate that can be measured independent of C rate as a watts per kilogram. And we can go to very high watts per kilogram with our cell technology. And what does that mean? That means that we can change the opportunity for things that need a lot of power and need energy. That translates into flying things because they need power to get off the ground. And the more power they have, the more thrust they have, the more they can lift, not just in a big aircraft, but in the things, the payload that they're carrying. And that's the name of the game, to increase the payload without making a much heavier aircraft, which is a sort of a very diminishing return, and then also having a lot of energy so that they can cruise and make it a commercially viable opportunity. And then finally, they've got to land. And you want to have a lot of power left over so that you can land safely and have emergency opportunities if those present themselves. Mm-hmm. That means that we can also sustain a high power even at the end of the life of that battery, meaning when you're at the low end of the discharge, i.e. you have less juice left in your battery.
So one of the things that that I thought was very handy was on your website you have this graph, and in essence you don't have to be an electrical engineer to see that the Amprius battery pack, when it talks about C rate, you can see that going on pretty much infinitum, and you can see that in essence the best that the graphite type batteries can do is around 3C. So this is kind of exactly what you want if you're trying to lift off an aircraft. And as most of you know, I was in the aircraft industry for quite a bit. We designed our own airplane. Didn't work. We decided to do that just before the banks all melted. But in your business, this is a brand new industry. This is the industry that I think a lot of us are going to think is kind of like the George Jetson. We finally made it to George Jetson's flying car kind of a thing. This is a big industry. Can you elaborate a little bit on what kind of money and whatnot is available here?
That's a great question. So the short answer is that flying vehicles, and this is data that we've assembled from analysts, in 2025 will be within 90 or over 90% of the total available market for batteries in electric vehicles. So putting numbers around that, the forecast is that batteries for electric vehicles in 2025 will be somewhere around 65 billion USD. and about 50 something billion for flying vehicles. And
Right.
that brings multiple flying vehicle categories together. That means uncrewed as well as crewed, i.e. the urban air mobility, flying car type, as well as high altitude sort of pseudo satellites. It's a collection of these flying craft that sum to a total available market of in the 50 billion. So it's a big market.
Yeah. Well, anytime you see the aircraft industry and the auto industry coming up with almost the same numbers, you're looking at an industry that is boundless, I guess, when it comes to the amount of revenue that can come back. And I don't want to dwell too much on how much things cost and whatnot, but one question I did have was, are you going to be moving into the auto industry, or are you going to stay in aircraft, or how is that working for you? Because your battery pack would instantly drop the weight of a car by about, well, let me rephrase that. For sure, it'll drop the price, or sorry, the weight of the battery pack with the same amount of power and energy in it. I'm guessing like about 50 or 60%. Is that correct? Is that?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's about right.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So the answer is our intention is to be a mainstream battery purveyor, covering all categories in mobility primarily, potentially consumer electronics, albeit we're not really focused on that segment. It's really mobility. The first market that we're addressing is air mobility and uncrewed, unmanned, if you will,
Yeah.
today and going forward in the next few years, certainly. And we're planting the seeds today for that. And that's the urban air mobility, that is the flying cars. As we scale, and the scaling will be driven by the markets that we're addressing today, we'll have the footprint, manufacturing footprint, to start to address in a serious way electric vehicles, because our price point will start coming down, our costs will
Right.
benefit from economy of scale, and of course the manufacturing capacity that we've built out for the markets that we're addressing.
There's a good point. I think we talked about your Colorado facility, and is this going to be a modification? The news, we haven't even talked about the new dynamic that you've got in your battery, but let's just get this one out of the way. Is there going to be any changes that you're going to have to make with the new chemistry that you've got at all? No.
No. So this doesn't change the manufacturing per se. This is a cell design with regard primarily to the sort of design of the electrodes. And fundamentally, it's the design of the cathode. The anode is basically the same across all our products. The loading, that is the mass loading, might be a little different across different categories of product, but it's the cathode that fundamentally changes.
Yeah.
And that is really what gives us this variation in power, energy, or a combination of the two.
So how much different is this new released battery? How much more oomph did it have over the one that we talked about when I was down there?
What the evolution is between, or what the evolutionary aspects of this cell versus the cell that we demoed to you when you visited, which was the ultra high charge, the ultra fast charge, or as it's called, extreme fast charge, which is the 6 minutes to 80% state of charge. So this cell also demonstrates that, but it goes even higher on the discharge and has higher energy density to boot. What does that mean? The cell that we demonstrated to you has about 360 watt hours per kilogram at C/5. That's the nominal specific energy. This cell has 400 watt hours per kilogram at C/5. And so you can see that it's a non-trivial, it's a significant bump in the basic energy content, that is energy per unit weight. and it also sustains very high C rates and the extreme fast charge. So it's a significant step function that really exploits the fundamentals of our innovation, which is the anode.
Well, anytime you can get a bump of 25+%, you're doing things in the right direction. Actually, that leads us right into the next question I've got. You talked about how quickly you can charge, but maybe what we should talk about is this 0 to 60 number, which is astounding. Yeah, and this is in a vehicle. This will be in a Tesla or something like that, not a truck or something. But anyway, yeah, I'll just hold on to my chair so I don't go flying into orbit when you talk about this.
So as far as we understand, the sort of world record for acceleration 0 to 60 nominal is around 1.5 seconds, and so it's not a hard sort of sell to equate this offering with achieving that or better, because clearly we have the oomph, the power that would certainly enable that kind of performance, and also sustain lots of range. So the two are really important to have in a practical vehicle or race car, if you will.
Well, a lot of the products that are coming out right about now that are electric are supercars, and 0 to 60 in a second and a half would probably make them very, very happy. The other thing that it just dawned on me, when you're talking about race car speeds and this kind of thing, I went to the Formula E, like the F1, only this is the Formula E races in Portland. They didn't go for very far. It was kind of like a very quick race. If you could equate that to your batteries, then you'd be looking at, I think the whole, with crashes and everything else, I don't think we're there much more than about 45, let's say an hour. But if you had your battery packs in there, we'd be now looking at 3 hours of race time, correct? Am I doing that right?
Well, it depends on how it's configured. So if it's no change in weight,
the weight would be less, because obviously the weight basically is the weight of the batteries.
Yes, but if we kept the same weight, let's just start with that.
Okay, yes,
I see. If we kept the same weight, then we'd have a significant boost in range, because we'd have at least a 50%. Yeah, I don't know what these race cars contain, but my guess is that 50% is the bare min improvement, and it's more likely a factor of 2, because race cars require very high power cells. And high power cells that sustain these very high watts per kilogram usually have very low energy density. And we could get most likely at least a factor, likely a factor of 2 in terms of range improvement, maybe 3.
I'm thinking 3, because quite frankly, everything that I see on your gravimetric and volumetric tells me I can't imagine it being anything less than 3. But
the numbers are probably right, because I think that these high power cells are typically less than 200 watt hours per kilogram, probably closer to 150 nominal watt hours per kilogram. And if we're delivering 400, then you're getting close to a factor of 3.
And that's where I was coming from. I just did the little, 1 versus 4. I mean, it doesn't take me long to sort that one out. But at the end of the day, I think this could be a big boost to the Formula E. People want to see a lot more action. Actually, one guy complained. He says, "Well, it doesn't make any noise." And some kid had told me, I gave a speech, and some kid in the, was standing there, and somebody said something like that, and he turned around and he says, "The Starship Enterprise doesn't make any noise." Hey, you're right. Yeah, and it goes plenty fast. So that's kind of, I think people get used to that after a while. I mean, normally you have to have this kind of stuff and earplugs and everything else in order to survive an F1 race, especially if you're right on the fence. But I got up close and personal, watched these things flying around, and to me it was absolutely amazing how quick they can go and the maneuvering that they can come up with. I think with your batteries, maybe you should talk to the F1 guys and see what you can do. You got Runkle.
Well, we actually do.
Wait a minute, you got Runkle. He knows all these racing characters. So yeah, go and poke him and say, "Hey, Don, how about it?" And because I think they use nothing but the Lucid electric motor, which I think is the best, and then putting your batteries in there would give the E1 guys, the Formula E racers probably a big boost. I think they'd really go for that.
The thing, however, as I understand it, is for the Formula E, every battery has to be the same.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And every electric motor is the same too.
Yes.
So you'd, instead of just making sale on one battery pack,
right.
I mean, I think there was 24 or 26 people that signed up initially, and they narrowed it down to something. But hey, selling 24 battery packs and getting your name stuck on the side of every Formula E car wouldn't be such a bad thing. Tell Runkle he owes me 2 beers now. So
yeah, actually, that's our target for our first foray into electric vehicles, to get into race cars. Actually,
well, I think if you can talk to the guys at the Formula E and tell them, "Hey, I can get you a longer race," I think they would be sitting up and taking notice. So let's jump back in here, and we talked a little bit about the C ratios. Let's talk a little bit about something I'm a little even more excited about, and that's the energy power density. We've touched on it, but this is the graph, and you can find this online. I don't know how to put this so everybody can see it, but anyway, there we go. Can you address this one a little bit, because it's not hard to see which way this one's going as well.
So this is what's called in the trade, if you will, a Ragone plot, Ragone, and what it is measuring is the watt hours per kilogram, the specific energy, versus watts per kilogram, the specific power. And in basically all cell chemistries and all cell designs, there's a trade-off. As you go to the higher discharge rates, i.e. you're on the x-axis, that's increasing, your energy drops off. That's invariable. The question is, how much does it drop off? And therefore, over what range of specific power can you sustain high energy? And what we're showing here is that we can go to very high C rates, very high discharge rates, very high watts per kilogram, and still retain plenty of energy. So by way of getting into the numbers here, at 3,500 watts per kilogram, which by the way is an unprecedented number.
You're right there. Yeah,
we're at somewhere near 260 watt hours per kilogram. So that's a amazingly high energy. And what does that mean in terms of the use case? That means that we can allow for planes, and that's this target market that we're talking about, to have lots of crews. So they have plenty of power to take off and land, but that doesn't soak up all their energy. They still have plenty of energy left over, so they've got a long duration of flight.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a huge game changer in this emerging urban air mobility. But not
Yeah.
only that, in today's markets for these drones, in particular military drones that need to have long mission time.
Right. Yeah. Again, we do dabble in the defense industry business, and I can remember working on it was a surveillance plane, and we were all excited because we could get it to stay up for 6 hours. I'm thinking that with your batteries and the right configuration of we'll call it a drone, I'm pretty sure you could easily eclipse that, and you don't have to deal with something that makes noise. Because the only way we could keep that up there was with this little, for lack of a better word, diesel engine. And yeah, I mean, I could have knocked that out with a slingshot. The other thing that I forgot, I didn't have it the right way around, but this is the C factor thing that we were talking about a little bit ago.
Yeah.
And you can see here how they, in essence, you see the drop on the bottom, which is a standard graphite type of battery. And then you can see what's going on with Amprius at the top, where the 10C. It's amazing here for.
Yeah, let me get into that and explain what we're seeing here. So we took a off-the-shelf, COTS as they're called, consumer off-the-shelf graphite battery, and characterized it. Mm-hmm. And this is a fairly respectable battery that is, let's say, addresses both power and energy applications, has a nominal specific capacity, specific energy at C/5 of around 250, which is pretty typical. The cylindrical cells, for example, in a Tesla are just a little bit north of that, maybe 260 to 270. Yep. So this is pretty run-of-the-mill. Yep. And then we characterized its power capability. Now, one of the limitations when you're doing high discharge is temperature. Cells heat up. I think anybody who's familiar with RC, planes or helicopters, they know that those lipo cells get warm, get hot, and they discharge fast because they're flying these maneuvers, and they get hot, and that limits, and they're self-limiting how far you can push the discharge. Right. So this graphite cell, hit its temperature limit. That's one of the curves that you have, which is around 60 degrees at 3C. So we couldn't push it any further. Whereas our cell, it didn't hit that temperature limit until around 10C. So same temperature, 60 degrees, but 3 times the discharge rate. So that's what the difference is here. Now, there are cells that are designed, we talked about this a moment ago, that are based on graphite that can sustain these high C rates, but they're much lower nominal energy. Right. They're down around 150. This one's around 260 watt-hours per kilogram. So yes, you do have high, anybody who's knowledgeable will say, well, no, you can get high C rates from graphite cells, but big trade-off in energy density.
Exactly right. And energy and power don't often go hand in hand, but as you just saw in the graphs, the Amprius battery pack seems to be doing quite well. Yeah, I had a couple of questions here. With the new chemistry, I'm assuming that weight-wise, it hasn't been affected. It's more like a refinement of the anode. Is that correct?
It's actually, as I said, this is mostly in the cathode design.
Yeah.
And we have a chart in that press release.
Cathode. Yeah, sorry.
That shows all the numbers, shows the dimensions of the cell, the capacity of the cell, and the weight of the cell that we're using in this release. And no, the short answer is that it's not a heavier cell. If it were, then we wouldn't have higher energy density.
No, I thought it was lighter. I was thinking the weight might go down.
Well, no, the energy, the energy, and let's just say it this way. The weight is about the same as prior cell that this is eclipsing, but the energy is much higher.
Okay,
As a
great.
result, the energy per unit mass, the specific energy watt hours per kilogram, is higher.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I think I mentioned it before that I liked is that your batteries don't get hot as quickly as others. And to me, that's a big deal. I mean, really, at the end of the day, I really don't want hot ever. No matter whether it's an electric motor or a gasoline engine or a jet engine. There are certain temperatures I just don't want to see, and this seems to be doing a good job at keeping it down. And the other thing that I'm not a big fan of is sitting there waiting for my car to charge. So most of the time I either do it at work or I do it at home when I'm sleeping. But yours will charge to 80% in 6 minutes. And to me, I'll take that all day long. I mean, by the time I parked and looked around, I'm probably pretty much ready to go again. I didn't even have enough time to get a coffee at the end of the day. That's really quick. So maybe you can comment a little bit about that.
Yeah.
That's the same as the other one, though, too, wasn't it? Wasn't the original?
Yeah. So that's right. So this is an evolutionary advancement in the cell that we used as the vehicle for demonstrating the extreme fast charge, which is, as you point out, 6 minutes to 8% state of charge. But what we've done with this is we've demonstrated a higher specific energy and no compromise in discharge, in high discharge rate, high C rate. So it's as I said, it's about 360 to was our previous specific energy. Now we're up to 400. So that's a significant increase. It's 10% approximately increase in overall energy density, which is huge in this business.
Yeah. So speaking of business, who is? Can you talk about any of your customers? I know you said don't mention anything about cost, but who can you talk about any of the customers that are?
Of course,
standing in line?
I can talk about categories, but I can't mention too many names.
Oh.
The ones that we have gone public with, I can mention, and they cut various categories. So, for example, in the drone business, we're supplying cells for the Teledyne FLIR, which makes the Black Hornet.
Right.
And that is what we've enabled is almost doubling their mission time with no.
What is the mission time on the Black Hornet?
So historically, it was on the order of about 20 minutes. So we're getting about over 40 minutes. So that's a game changer in surveillance and in recon. And that means that the radius that you can go effectively is doubled.
Yeah.
And so that opens the opportunity for more enhanced recon. And it's being used as we speak in a particular theater in Eastern Europe.
I wonder where.
And so there's a lot of demand for this, and that's great for us, and we're happy to support that. So that's one side, and that's a power cell that, of course, also has high energy density. And then on the other side of the equation, we've got a customer, Airbus Alto, which does high altitude pseudo satellites, and that's an energy play. They don't do a lot of power draw. It's pure energy, if you will. And that sustains long flight durations, basically all day. And then they charge during the day and do pure discharge at night. And so they're charging by solar cells that are mounted on the wings.
Right.
And they've demonstrated 2 months of flight, but they can do a year with our cells, which is
it's amazing.
The step that they're taking. And these are important, and it's a growing market because it is a cheap satellite. It's a way to do imaging and communications by just launching basically a paper airplane into the stratosphere.
So what would the altitude be for a plane like that?
Oh, easily 60,000 plus.
60,000. Yeah. And well, it's using your batteries. And what kind of airspeed would that have approximately? kills?
I don't have those figures off the top of my head, but they're not running really fast.
Well,
My guess is that they're on the order of 30 knots, thereabouts.
yeah, I was thinking 15 or 20, but 30, that's actually faster than I anticipated, because it would be more like a kite than much of anything else, except there's no air at 60,000 feet. That's almost, well, it is. It's 10 mile. Is that right? Yeah, 10 miles. 10 miles up. So,
Yeah.
well, that's pretty interesting. I know that you've been with the company for about 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Maybe it'd be a good idea if you could give a little bit about your background, and then we can close it out. So
Okay,
a little bit
sure.
about you.
So yeah, I've been with the company for 10 years, and have been a part of the sort of transformation from can we do it to yes, we can do it and we can sell it. And now what we're focused on is scaling. So we're scaling in two steps. One is our headquarters here in Fremont, California. We're doubling our footprint to get a fast jump on a capacity expansion of about 10x into the megawatt hour regime from hundreds of kilowatt hour, which we've been running for a few years now here. And then in parallel, we're building out a facility in Brighton, Colorado, which will enable hundreds of megawatt hour up to the gigawatt hour regime over the next several years. So that is, real demonstration of our seriousness and our intention to take this market in a big way. And that market that we're taking is for high performance right now, in particular in the aviation space, and then get more mainstream in electric mobility.
Yeah.
And me personally, so my background is semiconductors principally, and semiconductor derived technology. So I know something about silicon. I was doing silicon when silicon was still a part of Silicon Valley, but we're doing silicon differently now. We put it in batteries, and we're taking advantage of it in a different way that semiconductors do. So silicon is the second most abundant element on the planet. And so you can see that its application can be not only in the circuit, but in what powers the circuit.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I have one question, and if we have to delete it, I'll do that. But I was wondering, did you get past all of the regulations and whatnot in Colorado? I know that when we were talking before, there was a couple of stumbling blocks there. Is that all settled now? Are you all?
Pretty much. I mean, the good news for us is that the municipality and the state are really welcoming us with wide open arms, and very supportive local chamber of commerce. The businesses at large are very, very accommodating, very open. But you got to go through all the steps that it takes to build out a big facility. It's a 1 million square foot facility. And so there are, of course, all the permitting, planning, et cetera. And that's what's happening as we speak.
Well, that's a happy way to end the conversation. John, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk to you. I'm thrilled to hear that Amprius is doing well. I don't know if we mentioned it, but the last two videos we popped out, grand total there is plus 500,000 views. So that's pretty good. That means people are paying attention. So thank you again for a wonderful interview, and have a great weekend.